am so happy to get to talk to you about Faith-Based, Vince.
Awesome, thanks. I'm excited to talk about it.
I like this film. I love the film. I love what Luke did with the script. I love the fact that you guys, and this is where I think you're actually going to get faith-based audience moviegoers to see this film. You don't skewer Christianity, and in fact, you use the principles and philosophies of it for the journey that Luke and Tanner both go on as friends and individuals.
Oh, man. Awesome that you picked up on that. That was, sort of intentional that we wanted to tell a positive story, and, we didn't, we by no means are trying to make a faith-based movie, but in the back of our minds, we've, of course, thought, well, this is ideally more of what we would want to see in faith-based movies, just kind of watching real characters be real and make mistakes and, maybe make the right decision at the end of the story. And unfortunately, that's what a lot of faith-based movies are.
And you give us this great contrast. Jason Alexander is just fabulous as Nikki Steele.
Isn't he? He's amazing.
And when we get to the third act and we see, and the facade comes off with him at home, that's an eye-opener for people. It's like the wolf in sheep's clothing kind of thing. So, you guys have really worked this very, very well if people look at it for nice nods to faith without insulting anyone, without mocking the religion or the faithful. And at the same time, then you're ahead of the curve here. You've got a woman is the one who is going into space and landing on Mars. It's not a guy, it's a woman you've got doing that. You guys poke fun at, oh my God, yeah, she's in the movie business. We know what she does, and everybody's thinking that she does porn. When in fact, she has a very high-powered, important, quote-unquote, techie job.
Yeah, it's the guys in our movie that are idiots, not the women. Our female characters come out looking a little bit better than our male characters.
Your female characters come out looking great, and I just have to tell you, I talked to Richard Riley the other week. We were talking about another film that he has out right now, Limbo, and he brought this one up. So I was looking forward to it. He is hilarious as Herman, as a drunk. He is hilarious.
He's incredible. We worked with him. We worked with Richard on a few projects. I've done a couple shorts with him that I worked on, and I direct my first feature called Fear Inc., which is a horror comedy.
I saw it.
Luke's worked with him before, and he wrote a part specifically for him in Fear Inc. to play this crazy neighbor, and he he's not only a phenomenal actor, but he's the nicest guy. He loves being on set.
Yep.
He on Fear Inc. We were shooting in the middle of the night, and we had this big death scene where we were killing his character off. And we did our blocking and stuff, and he's standing outside with the crew, and we're like, okay, Richard, you can go inside and take a break. Well, it's going to be like 15, 20 minutes before we start shooting. He's like, nope, I'm going to stand here. I love just watching how the set works and what's going on. He just stood there and watched everybody, and he's just in love with everything, making movies and the craft of acting and everything. And it's just like he's such a great person to work with. And on Faith-Based, he was, he brought so much to Herman, and he's playing this drunk bar character, but he's got a gift for comedy too. So he's great.
How difficult was it casting this film, Vincent? I mean, you've got an embarrassment of riches here. You've got you've got Luke, you've got Tanner, but you've got Richard, you've got Jason Alexander, you've got Lance Reddick playing a preacher. You've got Margaret Cho, you've got Koechner, you've got Chris Marquette, who I know you've worked with before. A little film like this, and you get these incredible talents. How difficult was it to cast, or were you beating people away with a stick?
We weren't. It's one of those things where, I've been in Hollywood for 16 years now. Luke's been in LA, Hollywood for 14 years. Chandler's been we've all been here for a while. We've all made a bunch of shorts, and we've all worked with Funny or Die, and this isn't our first feature. So, you add all that up, and you start to accumulate this network of people that are really talented, and then you become friends with some of these people. So when we're working on, writing the script for Faith-Based, our initial, pass through this was like, okay, we worked with Richard, let's write a part for Richard. We worked with Carly Craig, and Luke's really good friends with Carly Craig, so let's write a role for her. Let's write a role for Marlon Young. We go to the gym and know Christoph Sanders, who's on Fox's Last Man Standing. All these people, Lisa Schwartz, who's a really big YouTuber and a phenomenal actress. These are all people that we know that was just like a phone call away and saying, hey, we wrote this part for you. Do you want to come do this? And so right off the bat, you've got, like you said, an embarrassment of riches in cast just from people we know. And then you start going after, like the people we didn't know, like Lance Reddick was our first, big reach. And knowing that we had this like really great part, Pastor Mike, Luke's dad, we knew this had to be somebody who can sort of play an antagonist, but also be funny and command presence and all these things that we wanted. And when we went to Lance Reddick, it was, of course, in our mind, it was a long shot. Mm-hmm. And we got a call from him. And the funny thing about Lance was he offered him Master Mike, and he called and he said, the script is amazing, first of all, but what the characters that actually jumped out at me were Nikki Steele, who's Jason Alexander's character, and the head of Price Flicks, which is Margaret Cho. Mm-hmm. He's like, I'd like to play one of those. And he was, we hadn't cast those other roles yet, and so we were like, look, you can, of course, you're Lance Reddick, you're incredible, we love you to death, we're huge fans. If you want to play either of these roles, you can have those roles, but let us pitch you why we want you to play Pastor Mike. And so we kind of gave him the spiel, and he's like, well, let me read it again. So he read it over the weekend, and he calls back, and he's like, you know what, you guys are right. I want to play Pastor Mike. I don't want to play those other roles. And that, started the chain reaction of then Margaret Cho and David Koechner and Jason Alexander, because once you get somebody like Lance Reddick, who's not only an insanely well-respected actor and has been in, with The Wire, one of the biggest shows on TV, mm-hmm. and recently been doing the John Wick franchise, and he's incredible in that, and all the other things he's done, Bosch, and all these other shows. When you start offering to people like, Koechner or Margaret Cho or Jason, and you say Lance Reddick is attached, that's a huge thing, because people want to work with him.
Yep.
So, we got, part of it was we're lucky to have talented friends, and the other part of it is I think people really resonated with the story, because at the end of the day, it's just a very personal story for us. We just decided, let's make something we would want to watch, that's for us, and has a lot of personal, elements to it. And then the other part is we were tried to be a little bit on the savvy side in terms of, we know we only are going to need you for a day or you for a half a day, or, mm-hmm. Whatever it is, and it added up to just like this cast that if you told me when we first started doing this, that's who would be in our movie, I'd say, you're out of your mind. There's no way.
And I can understand why people would be attracted to this script, because this film on the whole, it is very upbeat, great positivity about people, even when they are kind of shystery like Nikki Steele. But it's something we aren't seeing that many quote-unquote upbeat films. We see a lot of doom and gloom. We see heavy drama. You see cookie-cutter action. But this is really an interpersonal, upbeat, happy film. Dare I say it?
I know, right? And that sounds a little cheesy. And admittedly, we went into this process thinking the exact same thing. I'm glad you said that, because we love, one of my favorite shows of all time is Breaking Bad. And it's such a phenomenal show, and it's so dark. And it's rewatching it recently, I'm realizing how dark it is. And all the movies we watch and all the show, everything is just so dark. And then mix that with our world being kind of dark and depressing at times, especially this year. We went into this thinking, okay, we grew up with movies in the 80s and 90s, and most of those were not really dark. They were big and fun and high concept and, made you laugh. And, if you want to call them cheesy, you can call them cheesy. But at the end of the day, they were movies that, made you feel good about yourself. And so when we went into making this, we were like, yeah, the movie's called Faith-Based, and it's about two guys who realize all faith-based movies make a bunch of money, so they decide to make one of their own. At its concept, sounds like it's going to be a really, hard-beating satire, but at the end of the day, we're like, no, we want to make a movie that is fun and funny and, makes you laugh and makes you feel good by the end of it. And everyone tells you, don't make comedies because they're hard to sell. Mm-hmm. It needs to have more of an edge. It needs to have this. It needs to have that. And so we kind of went into this going, well, this may never go anywhere because we're kind of going against what everyone's telling us to do, but this is what we want to make, and we want to see more content like this.
Coming out now is perfect because typically people go to the heavy dramas and the action and the disaster films because they want to look at things that make them feel better about their own lives because what you see on the screen is worse. Okay, we're now in a time period where
we can't take any more negative.
Where, it's our lives are worse than what we're seeing on screen. Therefore, now you have to get counterintuitive here, which you have done beautifully. Talk to me.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you.
Talk to me about working with your cinematographer, working with Will Stone, and how you approach this to develop your visual tonal bandwidth. Because I've got to tell you, from the Andrew and Frida's production design, especially in Luke and Tanner's house with the colors on the walls and the design, right all the way up to Nikki Steele's house and the mansion on the hill. But the cinematography is you keep it light, bright, it never gets dark, tonally or visually. And interesting, what you guys do is when Luke and Tanner have a slight falling out, rather than go in on these ECUs or even mid close-ups, especially on Luke, since he is such a loser and he's woebegone and miserable, you actually take the camera out wider so that we feel this great sense of loneliness, being lost in this great big world. I am just so impressed what the two of you have designed visually, so I'm curious about your thoughts on it and how you came to develop it.
Yeah, well, thank you again. Yeah, Will Stone is phenomenal. This was actually the first project we worked together on. Surprisingly, we have a friend of ours who's a feature film director who we worked with on a bunch of stuff and produced content with and done commercials and all that stuff. And so when we were talking about DPs for this one, for Faith-Based, he threw out Will's name because he had worked with him a few times, and he sort of our friend John plucked Will literally out of St. Louis, Missouri, and found this guy's Vimeo reel and hired him to shoot his feature based off of a Vimeo reel, and flew him out to LA, and they shot a feature that they did right before Faith-Based. And so when we went to the screening of that feature and we saw his commercial work, we're like, let's talk to Will and see what his thoughts are about this movie. And, the nice thing was he's from St. Louis, so his first thing was this is my world. This is what I grew up with. I grew up with faith-based movies. My parents are from this background. I know a ton of people like this. This is a story I'd love to, sink my teeth into. And you mix that with, his visual aesthetic on everything he does just has this beautiful tone to it where he just does a phenomenal job of none of his stuff looks like comedic work, which for me, I was we wanted to do this movie. This could be shot like every other comedy, every other, as much as I love and am inspired by Judd Apatow comedies, all his movies look exactly the same.
Yep.
And we were like, how do we have something that stands on its own in terms of just what it looks like? So he brought a lot of that, and he had in his head how he wanted to light these scenes, and his approach is very much a like augmented reality aesthetic. He's always looking for where real light would come from as a DP, as opposed to just making the shot look exposed or overdoing it and making it look pretty. He's always trying to find, like, you know, he stresses himself out almost too much. When we were sitting here with Luke and Tanner in this sometimes really stupid comedy, and Will's just like standing in the background going, I don't know if this light looks good. I'm like, you realize we're making stupid jokes here right now, right? Like, it doesn't, but you add it all together and you've got this really great aesthetic going on. And then mix that with, like, what was challenging for all of us was, this is a comedy, and you know, my background is reality television editing, and so I wanted to bring some of that approach to this with the whole mockumentary style, the interviewing, and how we were shooting and doing improv. We shot the whole movie with 2 cameras, cross-covering. So on top of all that, we had to have Will light basically 360 for every scene.
Sure.
So we can point cameras in 2 different directions and shoot out our whole scene in one shot, which added more stress to him because, of course, he wants to paint each shot perfectly, and it's like, no, you need to light this whole thing, and then we need to go. It was a challenge, but at the end of the day, it ended up looking great. And then you mentioned, you know, Andrew and Frida, who are like our production design team. They went, this is a low-budget movie.
Yes.
We had no money for anybody. And the stuff that they came up with, I mean, the puzzles, the little details in every scene. Tanner's house is actually Tanner's house. And so that was one of the first places we shot. We were there for 3 days in a row, our first weekend of shooting. And we told Tanner, we're like, hey, production design team's going to show up. Is it cool if they, like, preset everything the day before? And he's like, yeah, sure. And so they come in and completely transformed his living room. And he could not believe it. He was taking pictures. He's like, this place looks completely different. They brought in so much stuff. I have no idea how they did what they did with the little money that we gave them. But it all, you know, every little thing tells part of the story.
Yes, it does.
And it adds up to this, like, you know, beautiful mixture of creative voices that all point towards this fun story about friendship and these 2 guys sort of figuring out their purpose in life. So.
And I have to compliment you on the carnival montage. Oh my God, that is beautiful, Vincent. Beautiful.
Thank you. Well, that's an interesting story with that is, you know, a movie like ours could never afford to get a location like that.
Oh God, no.
So we stole it, but we shot this whole movie in the Los Angeles Valley, and the first day of shooting, we drove by them setting up this Valley Carnival in a parking lot, and we thought we should shoot the Tanner Lisa, you know, love montage here. And so after day 2 of shooting, we took Tanner and Lisa and Luke and Will and bought tickets to the carnival and walked in with a small little camera and shot all that stuff. Guerrilla filmmaking, like no crew, didn't have permission, and no one stopped us. And we got like this incredible footage from it that looks like we spent, you know, an insane amount of money, more than probably the entire budget of our film on it. And yeah, it looks great.
I'll tell you, it looks as beautiful as the carnival scene they set up years ago for the Mighty Joe Young remake that starred Bill Paxton, Charlize Theron. Just beautiful, beautiful job. What you also do here is you actually have a love letter to independent filmmaking built within this story that is so nice to see. It's inspiring to filmmakers to see it, to want to be filmmakers, that they can do this generation's Mickey and Judy, let's put on a show. We don't have a barn. We got an empty warehouse. That's also a lovely thing that you did, and working so much with the green screen just added a comedic element.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Yeah, if we can inspire anybody in doing our work, that's like the ultimate compliment. Like, obviously, we want people to love our movies and our the things that we create. But if anybody watches our stuff and thinks, man, I can go do that, you know, I'm going to go make my own story, that's like the ultimate compliment, because I clearly have, filmmakers that I've been inspired by, and to be able to tell the story that this was literally a what can we shoot for no money concept. We're going to go out with our friends and shoot on iPhones, and then it turns into real cameras and shooting with Jason Alexander. It really is a like rags to riches story in that sense. And, you never know what's going to happen when you just say, let's go do it. Let's go tell our story.
Yep.
Let's not let money or the industry or anybody else to tell us that we can't tell the story we want to tell. Because ultimately, you never know what's going to happen and who's going to respond to it. And then to see people's reaction as the final product being so positive is really just the cherry on top.
Well, I would be remiss not to bring up not only Dusty Morgan's peppy music, but your quote-unquote theme song, I Hung a Cross for Jesus. Number one, it sounds very hymnal, but when you listen to the lyrics and then the way you have choreographed the performance is hilarious. There is so much double entendre innuendo in there. Delicious. Talk to me about what you were looking for with the overall score from Dustin, but also with this particular theme song.
Yeah, so we worked with Dustin a bunch. He's a good friend of ours. He's wickedly smart. Most of his career is playing in bands, and so he's transitioned that into being an incredible music composer who just he thinks outside of the box. It's that's exactly the type of people I love working with, where it's like, okay, how do we do something that's not what people would expect on every level? And so musically, he brings that, and it's really hard to score a comedy, and if you listen to most comedy soundtracks, it's all pop music, and the scores aren't that great. It's like, how do we do something that kind of stands on its own? And Dustin, of course, as he always does, went above and beyond with the score for Faith-Based. So then when it comes to Hung Across, the story behind that is we had this scene where Luke and Tanner are going into the church, and that's an actual church that I've been a part of in Los Angeles, and I've been a part of a few churches and so Luke, where Luke wrote this scene to mimic what the experience is like in a hip LA church that, a lot of these places think they're cooler than they are. Mm-hmm. Their music is a little bit edgier than maybe you'd expect for a church, but not inappropriate. The worship pastors have tattoos and are trying to be cool, and, and the coffee's great, and that's kind of the vibe that these places, they're like, how do we capture that? Well, we can go and we can license a typical worship song that Christians would recognize and play that. Or, the better idea, Luke's brother-in-law is Ryan Harrison, and he's in a comedy troupe in LA called Lost Moon Radio. And so Luke went to Ryan and said, look, this is what we're trying to do. Would you write something original that sounds like it could be played at any of these churches for the first, 30 seconds of it? And then all of a sudden, it starts to get borderline inappropriate, and you're wondering what the heck this guy's singing about. And so that's all we told him. And he went back and wrote 3 songs, sent them to us, and they were all hilarious. And we picked I Hung Across and thought, okay, this is the one that's going to be in our movie. And it turned out incredible. It's one of my favorite parts of the movie. And to be able to film that scene the way we did, we essentially shot an entire music video with these guys up on stage, and they brought the fun, sexual inappropriateness, tension / emo vibe that's going up on stage when you're singing about Jesus. And it's just like, what are you talking about? This is incredible. So, the whole experience blew us away.
Vincent, I saw Fear Inc. when you did that. You showed so much potential there, as did Mr. Barnett as the writer of Fear Inc. To see the growth in both of you as filmmakers with Faith-Based, I am beyond impressed. Beyond impressed.
Yeah, that is as nice as it gets.
means a lot. No, and as I said before, you when you go from, Fear Inc. for us, and Tanner was a producer on Fear Inc., so we all worked together on that project. That started as what can we, everyone tells you to make a horror film for your first feature, so, we made a horror comedy because that was about the best we can come up with without, like, completely abandoning our comedy roots. And, part of it was made for the industry, part of it was for us, and we made this thing not really knowing what we were doing. And so when you flip that to a project like Faith Face, where from the get-go, it's like, we're not doing anything that anyone's telling us to do. We're literally just going to go make something for ourselves, to have something come out of it that I think is better in a lot of ways and speaks to more people is just a sign that I think, if you're a filmmaker and you have a story you want to tell, go tell the story you want to tell, and don't let anyone else tell you otherwise.
Well, you guys went from horror to heaven.
Thank you, Debbie. I appreciate the time. You're so generous. I'm glad you love the movie.
And I can't wait to talk to you again. Cannot wait to talk to you again about another film, Vince.
Absolutely. Me too.